My name is Kaylan, and for more than 3 decades, I lived the life of a committed ascetic. My days were defined by quiet contemplation and instruction and the search for spiritual clarity. Growing up in a modest village, I migrated to the temple as a youth because I was attracted by the serenity and minimalist nature of the path of the elders. The core principles of the tradition, including mercy and presence and emotional distance, became the very center of my world. Long before the first light of dawn would touch the horizon, I was awake to sit in stillness. I focused entirely on the rhythm of my breath to quiet the noise of the mind and find the insight promised by the sacred journey. The temple was my entire reality. It was a place of deep balance where the low hum of chanting brothers merged with the rustling of the forest canopy. It was an existence purged of all trivial distractions and focused entirely on the achievement of the final release from the cycle of pain. I taught others the lessons I had mastered, and I guided both laypeople and novices through the concepts of the temporary nature of things and the importance of releasing the grip of desire. My purpose was to help them navigate the inevitable sorrow of life and see through the illusions cast by the self and the ego. Countless people arrived at my door with heavy hearts, and I attempted to demonstrate how they could let go of their burdens to find a stillness within. I rarely considered the ideas of other faiths. To my way of thinking, all religions were simply different dialects of the same human search for meaning. I viewed the followers of the cross as people who were motivated by a desire for rescue and a dependency on a creator. These ideas seemed completely opposite to the emotional independence I had spent my life building. I held no hatred for them, but I saw no utility in their beliefs. I believed the ancient wisdom I followed was more than enough. My life was steady and predictable and appeared whole. I felt I grasped the mechanics of reality and my specific place in the order of things. However, all of that was dismantled during a singular and life-altering evening. It began as a typical day. I led a morning focus session for travelers and then ate a simple meal with my brothers. I spent the afternoon in the library where I read old scrolls and reflected on their hidden meanings. As the light began to fade, I took my usual walk through the temple gardens because I loved the silence of the trees. But something felt wrong. I felt a slight pressure behind my ribs and a dull ache I could not identify. I chose to ignore it at first because I assumed I was simply tired from a long day. As the night drew closer, the pressure became a sharp, radiating heat that moved through my chest and into my shoulders. I sat down to try and breathe through the sensation, hoping that focus would steady my body. But the agony became too much to bear. I was taken to the nearest medical center, and the trip was a chaotic blur of light and noise. My body, which I had once controlled with such precision, now felt like a stranger turning against me. The medical staff spoke in urgent tones, and I could see the worry on their faces, but I could not understand their words. I was drowning in a sea of pain, and I was helpless to save myself. Lying on that thin hospital bed, surrounded by the mechanical sounds of life support, I felt my energy draining away. My breathing became a series of ragged gasps. The room around me started to disappear and was replaced by a heavy silence. My sight went dark, and the people in the room became nothing more than fading shadows. I felt myself drifting away from the shore of life, as if the ropes holding me to this world were snapping one by one. And as my physical reality vanished, I felt a new presence. It was massive and unlike any state of mind I had ever reached through study. It was not the empty void I had expected to find at the end of a life. It was something vibrant and alive. As the physical world went black, I realized I was no longer restricted by my skin and bone. It was disorienting at first, like stepping out of a heavy suit of armor and feeling the air for the first time. I could see the medical room clearly from above. I saw the monitors flashing in time with the rapid movements of the staff. They worked with extreme focus, trying to revive the body I had just left behind. It was a bizarre experience to watch myself from the ceiling. I saw my own face looking pale and still. I watched the doctors struggle to bring a pulse back to my chest. I knew that body was mine, but I felt no connection to it anymore. I was not afraid, but I was deeply curious. I wondered how it was possible to witness this scene without eyes. I was there, and yet I was not. I had spent years training to be detached from my feelings, but this was a reality that moved far beyond my training. This was an absolute separation. I watched a doctor shout orders while her hands moved with frantic speed. I saw a nurse adjust a line, and I noticed the sweat on his brow and the way his hands shook. I could actually feel the emotions in the room, including a deep layer of stress and a fierce desire to keep death at bay. In the corner, I noticed my mentor, the High Abbot. He was standing still with his hands pressed together in a silent plea. He had come as soon as the news reached the temple, and now he was reciting the ancient verses of passing. His presence gave me a brief sense of comfort, but I felt a vast distance between us. My mind was not occupied with my old home or my students. Instead, I was consumed by the mystery of my current state. As I floated in that space, a new force began to pull at me. It was not a physical tug, but an undeniable attraction drawing me away from the hospital. I tried to stay where I was, but the pull was too great. My very essence was being drawn towards something that existed beyond the curtain of time. Then I witnessed a light. It was not the fluorescent glow of the hospital or the flickering light of a temple lamp. This radiance was alive and pure. It offered a warmth that was not about temperature, but about a deep acceptance. It did not blind me, but instead it seemed to recognize me. It felt as though it had been waiting for my arrival. The brilliance seemed to have a pulse, as if it were the heart of the universe. I had never encountered anything like it in my decades of meditation. I had spent my life seeking a state of ultimate peace and emptiness, yet this light offered the opposite of emptiness. It was a state of total fullness. It was a sense of belonging that resonated in my core. I hesitated for a moment. I asked myself what this could be and where it came from. My old tradition taught that we should let go of all desires and identities. Yet this light seemed to offer a permanent identity and a permanent home. It challenged every concept I had used to build my life. Despite my confusion, the attraction of the light was impossible to resist. It was communicating with me in a way that moved past my intellect. It was a call to the heart. Even though I was uncertain, I moved forward. The closer I got, the more the light seemed to wrap itself around me. The feeling was one of being totally known, and yet totally loved. It was as if the light was looking through every layer of my history, including my mistakes and my pride, and yet it was welcoming me home. I had tried to destroy my ego for years, but this light was not asking me to disappear. It was offering me a reason to exist. I felt a living presence within the brilliance. It was personal and intentional and filled with a mercy that left me speechless. I felt very small, but I also felt incredibly significant. The conflict between my years of training and this new experience was intense. I tried to lean on my old framework, but the light dissolved my mental defenses. It was not attacking my old path, but it was filling a hole I had never realized was there. I tried to analyze the light, but the closer I came, the more it became everything. I felt a great sense of anticipation, like I was about to walk through a door that had been locked my entire life. As I stepped fully into the brilliance, I felt the embrace of the divine. It made me feel more truly alive than I had ever been in my physical body. As I stood in that radiance, I became aware of a person standing there. I could not see his face clearly at first, but the impact of his presence was massive. It felt as though he was filling the very space within my soul with a peace that was absolute. Then a figure materialized from the glow. His face was clear and powerful, and I knew him in an instant. It was Jesus. This was the one I had ignored as a teacher for the uninformed. But standing here, I saw that I was the one who had been uninformed. He was not a distant figure or a historical memory. He is the living truth. He looked at me with eyes that carried the weight of eternity and the gentleness of a father. He was not arrogant. He was the definition of compassion. His gaze was not looking for things to judge, but was looking for a way to heal. He saw every part of me, including my hidden fears and my long search for meaning. I felt a divine connection that was far more powerful than any level of focus I had ever achieved in the temple. He told me that I was there, because I had searched for the truth my whole life, and now I was finally standing in front of it. His words moved through me like fire. I wanted to defend my old life, but my voice failed. What could I possibly say to the one who stood before me as the embodiment of reality? All my discipline and my status in the monastery felt like dust in the wind. I asked him why I was there. He stepped closer, and his presence seemed to wrap around me like a shield. He told me that I had been called because the truth is not found in being alone or being detached from the world. He told me the truth is found in him. This was like a bolt of lightning to my soul. I had believed that peace was found in the absence of things and in the silencing of the heart. I thought the end of suffering was found in letting go of the world. But now I was being told that the path was incomplete. I was being shown that liberation is found in a relationship. I struggled with the idea of suffering. My whole life was built on the idea that we must move past pain through detachment. But Jesus was showing me that the way is to move into the pain with love. He explained that it is not the avoidance of the world that brings peace, but the willingness to face the world with a heart of service. He showed me that his own path was one of deep suffering, but that suffering was used to transform the darkness. He told me that I did not need to run away from the pain of the world, but I needed to embrace it with the understanding that love redeems everything. As he spoke, I began to see visions. They were more real than my own memories. I saw the life of Jesus, including the kindness he showed to the broken and the miracles he performed. I saw the cross, and I felt the weight of it. I felt the physical and spiritual agony he endured, but I also saw the empty grave and the victory over death. It was the fulfillment of every hope I had ever held. I saw him forgiving those who had harmed him, and I understood it was an act of total love. I witnessed with staggering clarity that human suffering was not merely the cold, mechanical byproduct of ancient karma that must be stoically endured through 1,000 lifetimes. Instead, I saw that he had intentionally chosen to take the collective weight of that suffering upon his own shoulders to rescue every one of us from the cycle. In the very place where I had previously understood only the rigid weight of law, he offered the refreshing wind of grace. Where I had only grasped the harsh reality of consequence, he presented the profound depth of mercy. He revealed to me that the greatest, most heroic act a human soul can ever perform is not the disciplined pursuit of self-preservation, but the total sacrifice of oneself for the sake of love. He looked into my spirit and asked if I finally understood the nature of the heart behind the universe. I could do nothing but nod in silent wonder as my mind struggled to process the sheer, vertical scale of this unconditional love. My old, foundational principles were being systematically dismantled and replaced by a much higher, more vibrant law of the spirit. I had spent my life seeking peace by turning my back on the noise of the world, retreating into the silence of the mountains. But now I saw that true, lasting peace is found by running toward the broken world with a heart overflowing with grace. He told me that the radiant truth I now possessed was not a treasure to be hoarded for myself, but a lifeline for everyone else. He told me that my life had a specific, divine purpose, and that I must find the courage to share every detail of what I had been shown. An immense weight of responsibility settled over me, accompanied by a deep, shivering sense of fear. I was a respected leader in my old community, a man who had been a pillar of the monastery. How could I possibly return to my brothers and speak the name of Jesus? I had spent 20 years teaching them a completely different path to liberation. Yet, as if hearing my internal panic, he assured me that I would not be forced to stand alone. He promised that his presence would be the ground beneath my feet. In that moment, a new and burning sense of mission began to take root in my chest. I knew the road ahead would be steep and riddled with hardship, but I also knew it was the only road that mattered in the light of eternity. The visions continued to unfold, and the scenery around me shifted once again. I was shown a realm of perfect, unclouded peace where the colors were vibrant, alive, and seemingly possessed of their own music. Everything in this place existed in a state of total, rhythmic harmony. This was the reality of heaven. It was not merely a distant location, but a state of being in absolute oneness with the Creator. There was no desperate struggle to reach this place, and there was no grueling spiritual work to be done to earn a seat at this table. It was, purely and simply, a gift of grace. I saw people there who were radiating a joy so intense it was almost blinding. They were not detached or distant as I had once sought to be, but were fully engaged, vibrant, and more alive than any human I had ever met on earth. Jesus told me that this was the final destination for every soul who chooses him. Then the light dimmed, and I was shown the agonizing reality of absolute separation. The atmosphere became cold, heavy, and utterly devoid of the warmth of love. This was the stark reality of hell. It was not the caricatured place of physical fire and pitchforks I had once marked, but a place of profound, echoing isolation from the presence of God. The people there were not being tortured by external forces, but were trapped within the prison of their own self-centeredness and their persistent rejection of the truth. They were not being punished by an angry or vengeful deity. They were simply suffering the natural, eternal results of their own free choice to stay away from the light. Jesus told me with a voice full of compassion that he did not desire for a single soul to inhabit that place of shadows, but he explained that true love necessitates the freedom of choice. We must be entirely free to choose our own path, or the love we offer is not love at all. The weight of his words anchored themselves in my spirit. I had always viewed suffering as a circular, repeating cycle, but here I saw it as a voluntary separation. He looked at me and told me that the long path I had walked in the temple had not been a waste of my years. He said that my discipline, my silence, and my sincere desire for mercy were seeds that had carefully prepared the soil of my heart. But the harvest, the truth, was not found in a meditative technique. It was found in the person standing before me. He spoke with a gentle authority that dismantled the final remnants of my old worldview, explaining that we were never intended to be solitary sparks in a cold universe, but were created specifically for a deep, vibrant relationship with our Father. He revealed that true peace is not a clever escape from the hardships of reality or a mental retreat into a void, but a total transformation of reality through the sacrificial love of the Savior. As he spoke, I felt decades of thick misunderstanding and spiritual confusion falling away from me like heavy, rusted chains. I had spent my entire adult life viewing salvation as a massive monument I had to painstakingly build for myself through the raw power of my own discipline. Now, I saw with blinding clarity that it was a finished gift, one I didn't have to construct, but simply had to receive with open hands. He looked at me with a divine intensity that instantly brought me to a place of overwhelming, cleansing tears. He told me that I must return to my earthly life because my journey was far from over. In fact, the real work was only just beginning. He showed me that there are countless souls currently walking in a thick, suffocating darkness, searching desperately for the same radiant light I had just found. He told me that I must go back and be a lighthouse to them in their storm. Gradually, the overwhelming radiance began to fade into a soft glow, and even as the visual brilliance diminished, I felt the unshakable promise of his presence vow to stay with me through every shadow to come. The exact moment I was pulled back into my physical body felt like being violently compressed and shoved into a small, suffocating, and incredibly painful box. The infinite peace of the light was suddenly replaced by the jagged, harsh reality of a sterile hospital room. I heard the frantic shouting of the doctors as they realized my vitals had spiked and I was back from the dead. My chest was screaming with the raw pain of the resuscitation efforts, and my lungs felt as though they were filled with liquid fire. It was a jarring, almost unbearable transition from the weightless infinite back to the heavy finite. Through the haze, I saw the sheer relief washing over the faces of the medical staff. I also saw my old mentor standing in the corner. His face was pale with an ancient worry, and in that moment, I knew that the story I was bringing back would irrevocably change the bond between us forever. I spent the next several days in a state of profound, silent reflection that the hospital staff mistook for trauma. While my physical body was weak and shattered, my spirit was white-hot, and on fire with a new purpose. I had been a senior monk, a respected teacher, and a trusted guide to many. My entire social and professional identity was rooted in the old way of thinking. Yet I knew I could not ignore the staggering weight of the revelation I had received. I asked for a Bible, a book I had once viewed as a collection of simple myths, and I began to devour the stories of the Messiah. The more I read, the more my heart recognized the frequency of the truth. The 20 years of discipline in my past had inadvertently trained me to listen with great focus, and now, for the first time, I was finally hearing the correct voice. I discovered that the path of Jesus did not reject the genuine compassion I had cultivated in the monastery, but it finally gave that compassion a divine source. It gave the concept of love a name and a face. I saw with humbleness that I had spent my life trying to climb a mountain that he had already descended to meet me on. When I was finally discharged and returned to the temple grounds, it felt as though I were walking through a fading memory of someone else's life. The ancient stones and the towering trees remained exactly the same, but the man walking among them was a completely new creation. Eventually, I gathered the staggering amount of courage required to speak my truth. I gathered my brothers and told them plainly about the light, the void, and the person of Jesus. Many did not want to hear it. They whispered that the trauma of the accident had damaged my mind or that I was suffering from a profound delusion. Some were visibly angry, viewing my testimony as a betrayal of our traditions and a slap in the face to our lineage. But others listened with a haunting hunger in their eyes. They felt the same gnawing emptiness I had hidden for so long, and they were looking for a way out of the shadows. I realized then that my 2 decades in the monastery were not a mistake, but a unique gift. My background allowed me to speak to people who would never dream of listening to a traditional preacher. I realized I could bridge the gap between 2 worlds. I could show them that the deep, elusive peace they were searching for in the silence of the void was actually waiting for them in the warm, scarred arms of the Savior. My family was understandably bewildered at first. They looked at me as if I were a stranger inhabiting a familiar body. However, as the weeks turned into months, the radical, undeniable change in my temperament and my very soul began to act as a silent witness that softened even the hardest of their hearts. I sat down with my brother, a man who had spent his entire life running in the opposite direction of any spiritual path, cynical and hardened by the world. And as I spoke of the searing reality of the light, I saw tears well in his eyes for the first time in years. He wasn't moved by a clever argument or a theological debate, but by the undeniable weight of my experience. My life is no longer a collection of hours spent in a quest for personal perfection. It has become a living testimony of unearned grace. I have ceased my restless seeking for enlightenment, for I have finally been found by the light of the world. The transition from a life of grueling self-effort to a life of humble grace is, without question, the most difficult and painful journey a human being can ever undertake. It is not an easy walk. It requires the total, agonizing death of the ego and the abandonment of the pride that tells us we can save ourselves. Yet, I have learned that this death is the only doorway to finding true, vibrant life. I'm no longer a monk perched in a mountain temple, isolated and striving. I'm a child of God, anchored and loved. I invite you now to stop and look deeply into the quiet architecture of your own heart. Ask yourself what it is you are truly searching for in the silence of the night. If you feel a hollow emptiness that remains despite your greatest achievements and your most sincere spiritual efforts, know that there is a love that does not just improve you, but fills you to the brim. The path is standing open, and the invitation is personally addressed to you. Turn your face away from the shadows of your own effort and toward the light. In doing so, you will finally find the peace that does not just satisfy the mind, but passes all human understanding. My name is Kalen, and I have been found by the truth.